Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's 3 Yams. Welcome to the first episode of creating custom Pokemon based on my nephew's drawings. If you don't know what this new series is all about, go ahead and check out my overview or introduction video that I posted, and it'll fill you in on what this is all about. So, the first Pokemon here in the lineup is a normal and flying type Pokemon. Being a normal type doesn't mean that it's necessarily normal. It just means that it doesn't have a specialized element. Typically, kind of like fire, water, grass, stuff like that. Being a flying type, however, means that this Pokemon has the ability to use flying type moves. In Pokemon, all flying type Pokemon, have the ability of flight, but not all of them have conventional methods of flying. Some of them just kind of do. They just kind of fly just because they're a flying type. But I guess that's okay. It maintains continuity, nothing else. Now, when approaching this first Pokemon design, I'd like to say that my initial instinct was to do some research. Being that this was my first go at this, but it was not. No, I did not start off my journey with research. I realize now that this was a terrible mistake. But anyway, the first thing I tried to do was come up with some designs of my own. I was roughly trying to get inspiration from the original drawing, but not really, if I'm honest. It was alright, but I didn't feel like I was making much progress. So I started over. This time I tried to start, by taking into account the details of the Pokemon. It's a small creature. It looks pretty small. It's a flying type. And that normal type doesn't really give me too much leverage. But just taking all that into account, my first idea was, trying to draw from real life, and use those details. The first thing I thought of was a hummingbird. So I spent a couple of hours drawing and, looking at hummingbirds, watching them a little bit on YouTube. But nothing I came up with felt quite right, The designs felt a little bit too, I guess for lack of a better word, they felt too real. Like Pokemon aren't, necessarily realistic. And not that my drawings, are photorealistic or even that realistic in any sense. It's just I didn't get the Pokemon vibe from them. And there was just too much going on to really fit, that Pokemon mold. So this immediate struggle with this design and, not really knowing how, Pokemon designs worked was what inspired me to do the research that's shown in my, my overview introduction video. So just in case you haven't watched it, I'll post the link in the description. I'm not sure if YouTube will allow me to make a link that you can tap on the video, but I'll try to do it here. And if you don't see it right now, that means either YouTube doesn't allow it or I couldn't figure out how to do it. Now, with the knowledge I gained, I was able to come up with a couple of different character designs, very different from the first iteration. I decided to start this time by directly referencing the original drawing. Kobe seems to have a pretty good grasp of, how Pokemon work nowadays. And to be honest, his design is really simple, which is, really key to the Pokemon formula. So I started to, reference his drawing literally. Like I picked out, the big shapes, like this head and these feet and these pointy I believe these are wings. I felt that these elements could make some really interesting design features for this Pokemon. And, as well as, directly reference his drawing, which is the whole point of this. I was having a little bit of trouble getting the Pokemon to feel like a flying type, though. So I Googled some existing Pokemon to get inspiration and to see, what was wrong with what I was going about it. In my mind, I was thinking of, the typical flying types. The ones that look like birds or are noticeably flying types. But after looking, and searching different flying types, what I learned is that existing Pokemon aren't all that consistent. Like, these designs, they're kind of all over the place when it comes to flying types. And some of these wings, they would never work. Like, this is flat. And that's not a wing, but it doesn't keep them from being flying types, and it doesn't hinder them from flying. Take that, aerodynamics. It seems like the artists are more concerned with making interesting designs of Pokemon rather than making a Pokemon's look clearly define its capabilities. This can be seen throughout the different typings too, not just flying types. And this was great news for me. Like, this is fantastic, especially for my first Pokemon designs. I definitely need this type of leverage and freedom to just essentially do whatever I need to, or do whatever I want to, and then just pass it off as a certain type. I'm gonna try, not to go overboard, but still keep this in mind that accuracy isn't, the most important thing. So I decided to run with these couple of design ideas and this newfound information about just how far I can really push the design of a Pokemon. Eventually, I did start trying to add, flying Pokemon-like features, like the typical stuff. Things that would, be a really key element in defining, this is a flying type. Sort of like things like a beak-like nose, stuff like that.
Who's that Pokemon?
So once I had a design that felt pretty good, and I got some feedback from Mrs. Yams, and she said, it looked pretty good. I felt good enough about it to scan it and bring it into Photoshop. And when I did that, I was able to trace over it. And so I traced over it a couple times, to make cleaner lines. And that, just made it easier to follow, as well as, gave me the opportunity to try out some other design ideas while I had, this digital drawing area. To me, drawings are a whole lot easier to manipulate in Photoshop, but I like to get down a solid idea on paper first, usually. It seems like a little bit more, approachable to start on paper first. And so when I'm drawing concepts and trying to gather ideas, I feel like I can more quickly iterate on paper, get my ideas out faster. But when I'm using things like Photoshop to draw concepts, I like to use blue and red ink. For some reason, blue and red, it just kind of feels less permanent, almost like I'm drawing in pencil. Even though I can erase anything, when I'm drawing digitally, using a color other than black makes me feel more at ease. I think it's something psychological, like, I think, carpenters or people who draw blueprints, they don't use, black ink. And then, like, when you see something in black ink, it's like, man, this is permanent, this is official. So using these alternative colors just makes it, makes it seem a little bit more, like I could be a little bit more reckless, I guess. So after I finished my first tracing pass of the original sketch, I decided to see if I could push the design a little bit further. There was nothing to lose, so why not? This Pokemon is actually considered a basic Pokemon, which means that it evolves twice. So it's classified as a baby Pokemon because it's part of a 2 evolution family. So to see if I can make the design fit a little bit more into this mold, I started looking at other baby Pokemon for inspiration. The first thing I noticed is that baby Pokemon have huge heads. Like, in most cases, they're the same size as their bodies. Which, if I think about it, isn't all that different from like baby humans. Man, baby humans have big heads too. And then when they're first born, they're so big they can't even hold them up with their necks. And other baby things, as a matter of fact, they have huge heads too. And then not only do they have those big heads, but they have big eyes in those big heads. So this inspired me to scale the head up just to kind of make it look more like a baby. And from here, I just adjusted a few other body parts until I was happy enough with the design to move forward. And it was starting to look like a Pokemon to me. So the next step was to do the final line rendering. Now I was going to go back over it with black ink. I hadn't spent too much time messing with Photoshop brushes. So I tried to find something that sort of resembled like a pen, just to give it that kind of grainy line. So I decided to use the dry brush pack, and it's standard with Photoshop, so I didn't have to look this up or anything. And I was pretty happy with how it turned out, being a standard brush set. I decided to go with a pen type line just so it didn't seem so perfect and pristine. Next was to paint. Pokemon artists used, paper and pens and watercolors to paint Pokemon portraits back in the day. And the watercolor aesthetic, it just kind of carried on into some of the digital drawings too. And I really like the way it looks. But I didn't want to spend too much time, searching for brushes and try to emulate the watercolor effect perfectly, because that's not how all the Pokemon drawings look. I just really like the way it looks. I didn't want to copy. I just wanted to kind of, be in the ballpark. So I just continued to actually use the dry brush set. And they didn't come out looking too bad, in my opinion. It almost kind of gives that feeling of, a dry paint type of feeling. When watercolor dries, it kind of leaves spots, and then depending on how much water you use, it'll thin out the colors and reduce contrast, things like that. And I feel like the dry brush set kind of, gave that same impression sometimes. So when I was painting, I pulled a couple of colors from the original drawing. My nephew got a bunch of mileage out of those office pens. I'm really impressed. And just looking over all the Pokemon he created with, I'm sure it was just a handful of, pens and markers that were just around the house. He actually made some, very unique and distinguishable designs. When I'm painting, I like to make the background like a middle gray tone, when I'm dealing with the colors. For me, it helps to determine values. Yeah, I've gotten this suggestion from, other digital painters on YouTube. I'm not the best at finding colors, but this trick has definitely helped me to improve. So, if you have any trouble, figuring out colors and stuff, and, you think that maybe you want to try something out, I definitely suggest, whenever you go to paint your drawings, to just make the background a darker gray. I know some people use like a color that they don't use in their drawing, like a bright green or something. But But to me, sometimes that throws off the way the other colors look. And so then if I put it on a white background or something, having that green beforehand just makes everything look kind of different. So after finalizing the design, I Googled some Pokemon cards. They have the most inconsistent art style, and it makes for an amazing assortment of cards. Like, to me, this type of variety makes collecting them that much more interesting. Like, you really don't know what you're gonna get. It could be this, which would be unfortunate, especially if you're expecting this. But you could get something really cool too. But I intend to take full advantage of this fact while creating these cards. Just try to make a variety to see, what we can come up with. And hopefully, not make any that look too bad. My nephew said that his favorite Pokemon cards are the old school ones. The ones that they used to make in the 90s. I guess the early 2000s. So I decided to go with that, this old school card design. And then I'll mix up the artwork. Best of both worlds, I'm thinking, So hopefully it looks okay. Maybe I'll try one of these fancy designs if I get brave enough. But that's about where I'm going to keep them. And really the new cards, they haven't deviated too far from this original design. So it won't be too bad. So there you have it. That's Tweety, the first Pokemon in this series. I'm keeping the same names that my nephew actually came up with them, just to stay true to the source material. The final design actually came out a little bit more reptilian than I anticipated, and this influenced the design of its evolved forms. The evolution family, as you'll soon see. I actually worked on all three of these at the same time. Honestly, I'm not sure if this helped or hindered the process, though. I guess we'll find out. So now let's see if Tweety meets the character design challenge criteria that I made up for myself. Number 1, a strong silhouette. I think Tweety's silhouette is okay. I think a big part of a strong silhouette is the understanding of the subject. If you've never seen a particular object, then the silhouette could never make sense because you have no point of reference. If it's similar to something else, then maybe you could guess. But when it comes to unique character design, I think it's important to have seen the character first to understand what the silhouette is. Otherwise, it could really be anything. I've seen this happen a pretty good bit with newer Pokemon. I'll see the silhouette of Pokemon that I've never encountered before, and I'll have no idea what it is. But then once I see an actual picture of the Pokemon, the silhouette makes a whole lot more sense. I believe that a strong pose helps a silhouette too. This 3/4 angle, it shows a good bit of Tweety's features without, too much overlap. Not a whole lot is covered up. So I think it works out pretty well. Number 2 is a clear defining feature. So I think the clear defining feature, that I wanted to emphasize was this head crest. It's big, it has a high contrasting color, that kind of pinkish, purplish red against the, the blue skin tone. I think it was a nice touch to kind of just break up, the way the character looks. And it kind of had a feathery shape too, to kind of allude to this flying aspect of Tweety, even though he doesn't have any wings. Number 3, a maximum of 3 colors. I just realized that I actually made number 3 colors. That's pretty cool. That connection. Anyway, since the original drawing only had 3 colors in it, like the blue pen, the kind of purplish reddish pen, and then the black ink, and then he left a couple of white spots, And then there were some grays that he got in there. I have no idea how he did that, but he managed to do it. But anyway, since the original drawing only had those 3 colors, this was actually pretty easy to accomplish, keeping those 3 colors in mind. Blue, is noticeably the dominant color in his design, so that's what I went with in mine. And then I used the blacks, the grays, and the reddish pinks to give it some more contrast. And number 4, the bonus challenge. Is Tweety's design simple enough that a child could draw it? Honestly, this one was kind of hard, I guess, to determine. I drew Tweety in about 5 minutes or so. Just a couple of minutes to kind of try to simulate, I guess, a child drawing it, or somebody, trying to draw Tweety for the first time. But I didn't feel like it was genuine, because I've spent a pretty good bit of time, designing the character and drawing it and painting it. So, if you have the time, take a moment to draw Tweety for yourself. You don't have to share your drawing if you don't want to, but let me know in the comments, if you felt that the design was simple enough for a child to draw, or maybe somebody who just doesn't draw that often, if they just wanted to draw the Pokemon, if they would be able to draw it. Maybe you found that it was really easy, and maybe there are things that I didn't notice would be really difficult to capture. And now this is the part where I need your help. Tweety's Pokemon card needs HP, health points, and some battle moves too. So if you like Pokemon, a bit about Pokemon cards, or not even, you just maybe have a cool idea, put your suggestions in the comments about what to do with the card. The selected comments will be featured on an upcoming video along with the completed card. So let me know in the comments if the final design turned out how you expected. And also let me know if you liked this new format of video. I've been trying some new things out. If you'd like to share your own designs of this Pokemon or original Pokemon you've come up with, post it with the hashtag 3YamsPokemon. I'll be posting this one there too. I would love to see what you come up with. Got some really talented artists out there. And last but not least, like the video, share it, and subscribe to see the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.